We've got about another 9 minutes or so to pick the brain of Zac Oswald with Legal Aid Society. He really specializes in renters' rights and defending renters in this complicated market that we are in right now. Zac, thank you for spending some time with us tonight. Really some critical information that I know that people are just so hungry for right now. I want to talk about it. We talked about how going to court can be so intimidating, and one of the questions I had to ask you about was the new appeal bond law, and that just sounds intimidating. So what is it?
So for tenants who lose in general sessions court, that's where most landlord-tenant cases happen, they do have the ability to appeal to get in front of another judge in circuit court. However, the legislature has expanded essentially this requirement that if tenants want to stay in their house on the appeal to the next court, that tenants have to pay 1 year's worth of rent ahead of time in order to be able to get to that next court. And what we're seeing is that that's really limiting tenants' access to the courts. I mentioned earlier, tenants are losing in court because they can't find childcare, they can't get off work. But now you've complicated the problem because a tenant who lost in general sessions court can't even access a new court because they don't have 1 year's worth of rent. I don't have 1 year's worth of rent laying around, much less if I'm renting a property in Tennessee or if I'm low income. So it's really what we've seen is that tenants are they're stuck with whatever the decision is in general sessions court. And that's really unfortunate because those decisions are not necessarily happening because they've been well thought out and decided by a judge. Sometimes they're being decided by default, and sometimes they're being decided by judges who are trying to cycle through 100, 200 cases in one day. So they don't have time to consider the arguments and think about whether or not the tenant's defense is good enough to keep them in their housing or not. They just have to make a decision because they've got 199 more cases to go through. And it's just been, it's been really unfortunate as far as the impact on the tenants who are contacting us.
I do want to touch a little bit on landlords and how the moratorium, when that was in effect, it's no longer in effect, really has impacted them and what that looks like today. What are we seeing as the long-term impact on landlords?
Absolutely. Landlords definitely took the brunt of COVID at the beginning, certainly as the ones who were providing housing and tenants weren't able to pay. That's why we saw these American Rescue Plan funds come through for emergency rental assistance. And those funds pay all the way back to March. They pay unpaid rent arrearages all the way back to March of 2020, and they can pay up to 18 months worth of rent. So a landlord who is looking to be made whole from that should really work with their tenants to secure these rent relief funds, because that's going to make the tenant whole, that's going to keep the tenant housed, and that's going to recoup the money that the landlord lost, including late fees are being covered by this program, court costs are being covered by this program, and even the attorney's fees for the landlord if they had to file a lawsuit but are willing to put it on pause until the rent relief programs can pay the back owed rent for tenants.
And those are still available is what I'm hearing you say.
Those funds are absolutely still available and should be available in Tennessee at least until September of 2023. I misspoke a little bit earlier. I thought that Rutherford County was still accepting applications. They are not. They are moving applications that were filed before June 30th. And so tenants across Middle Tennessee, all who have not applied before, need to contact THDA, which is the Tennessee Housing Development Agency, at thdA.org or at their phone number 844-500-1112 and apply for these rent relief program funds. Again, it's covering 18 months worth of rent arrearages and forward moving rent for tenants who were impacted by COVID. And for landlords out there that are saying, well, this program's out there for tenants, the landlord can initiate the application as well. And so either side can do that. So if you're a landlord who was affected by COVID because your tenant wasn't paying the rent, here is the resource to get you paid up on the rent that your tenant owed, and you just have to work with THDA to make sure that you can be made whole.
So THDA is really the clearinghouse right now to get into if you need help with the rent, something related to COVID, though that's a very, very big bucket right now.
Yeah, it's basically everybody at this point in time. And if you're a tenant who did get some money from the Davidson County program or for the Rutherford County program, I would just encourage you, you're still eligible for 18 months. So reach out to the program you applied for and just ask, hey, can I get the rest of my 18 months from you, or do I need to file an application with THCA and let them direct you to what you need to do next to make sure that you're accessing the funds that are available through the federal government to help get people past COVID-19.
Yeah, because a lot of folks are still reeling from it, and now we have this inflation issue. What is your best advice to folks who are calling in right now, mostly about back rent? I imagine, is that your number one kind of complaint, is like, I'm falling behind on rent and I'm going to get evicted?
Yeah, that kind of coupled with how can I find a place that I'm going to afford, and one problem leads to another, right? Either you're behind on rent, you get a scarlet letter E for eviction on your record, and now it's hard to find new housing, or you're in a place that isn't affordable and you know that you're struggling to make it month to month, and you're worried about what could happen as a result of that. We
really haven't touched on folks who are saying, how can I find affordable housing? Where do you point them?
That's tough. You know, we guide them. There's a website called tnhousingsearch.org that's administered by the Tennessee Housing Development Agency, and that website is kind of geared towards landlords posting their availability on the site, so that you're seeing in real time what is actually available out there. And there's some search markers that you can put in. Does the landlord accept Section 8 vouchers? Is this income-based or sliding scale rent? Those sorts of things would allow a tenant to kind of earmark what might be out there based on what their preferences are and what they need in order to afford their housing.
And that website one more time?
tnhousingsearch.org. As
we wrap up here in this last minute, Zac, give us a little bit more information about when it's appropriate to reach out to legal aid and what y'all do.
You know, it's always best to reach out to legal aid when you think you might have a legal issue, because chances are, if you think you do, you do. And a lot of times we can even catch some other legal issues that are going there. And so remembering that we're talking about housing tonight, but we help with domestic violence, we help with government programs that people need to access, like food stamps and Social Security, that we're helping with Department of Labor unemployment cases, and that we're there for those sorts of needs, even IRS tax collection issues. We really do it all on the civil side. You can think of us as the civil public defenders. We are there to help people who can't otherwise afford an attorney, and you can always reach out on our phone line or our website to see more about what we do and how to access us.
And we have those on the bottom of the screen, but if you don't mind saying them, because they're awful small.
Yeah, the website is www.las.org, and our phone number for all of the 48 counties that we cover in Tennessee is 1-800-238-1443.
Zac, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I hope we've been some help to some folks. When we come back, I'll tell you what we have on tap for the rest of the week. Stay with us.